Hi, my name is Sharon Coleman. I am the host of the Perfection Rejection show, how to finally overcome your perfectionism and get shit done. And I am here today with Sue Monhait. She is a business owner, a podcast host, speaker, educator, and best-selling author for the community she's lovingly named Gifters, Bakers, Crafters, and Makers. People who create beautiful and or delicious products that they want to share with the world. So, hi Sue, welcome to the show.
Hello Sharon, it's so great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm glad to have you. So I know a lot of our audience are creative entrepreneurs, and you have a lot of experience with crafters and makers and bakers and I'm getting it wrong. Gifters, bakers, crafters, and makers. So can you tell me a little bit how you got your start in that field, sort of like where you started?
Well, I started actually in my corporate life not having any idea of where the path was going to lead, as is the story with most people. But in my corporate world, I worked with a lot of smaller boutique ma and pa type shops, all the way from bakers to women's apparel to mattresses. I mean, it really ran the gamut, all the way up to some of the bigger, larger brands that you would know, like McDonald's, Pizza Hut, some of those. And we were doing marketing consultation. Best way to think of it, interestingly enough, is we were doing through direct marketing what now Facebook does through Facebook ads. So all that highly selective type things. And little did I know along the way, I was going to pick up a lot of information that I could use later in my own businesses. So now I have two different businesses. One is called the Ribbon Print Company. Hence, if you're watching this on video, you see a bunch of ribbon behind me. We sell custom ribbon printing machines. And then getting to the point of actually servicing the creative group, the audience that I call gifters, bakers, crafters, and makers. That happened when I was out at trade shows when we exhibit for the Ribbon Print Company. Because when people come up to a booth, I mean, good way of doing business for any of us, you understand where your customer's at or prospect is at before you start telling them about your product, right? So we'd ask them, well, what's your business? You know, what are you into, et cetera. And so many women would say, well, when I start a business, I'm going to do this. Or when I start making money in my business, I really could see how a ribbon printer could enhance my services. And so we'd get into these conversations and I'd see that women would be getting themselves stuck. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know what they should be doing because that's what I saw example over example over example in my corporate life. And so I overlaid my corporate life with a need that I saw now in my businesses. And that's what led to me starting the podcast, doing the book, now doing group consulting, etc. So that's maybe longer winded than you wanted, but that's how I got my start.
No, that's really interesting because so what did you find were getting people stuck? So what they were saying they were going to start a business, or they were going to finally make money in their business. So what was holding them back from doing those two things, do you think?
Interestingly, you would kind of think that it might be money, but it wasn't. And this leads perfectly into the topic of this whole summit, right? Fear. Fear that they weren't going to do the right thing first, right? So perfection, that whole perfectionism thing. And what I try to explain to people, you know, when they come up, women mostly, when they're coming up to the booth, is there isn't always just one right way. The thing you should be most afraid of is getting in your own way and stalling and not doing anything. And that's the biggest fear of all, is feeling that if you're not perfect right out of the gate, you've lost the game. You know, like some people, if you think of a running race, and this analogy has just come to me, I've never used it before ever, but if you're running a sprint or any long-term race, let's just say, you might not start off as being in first place, but when you get to the end, maybe you are, right? So it doesn't mean right out of the gate, you have to be absolutely perfect all the way along. You perfect and change and adjust as the race continues, as the journey continues. And I don't know one person, not one person, who hasn't stumbled along the way. So that idea of perfectionism and getting it right from the start isn't even really reality. Fairy tales, but not reality.
Right. Well, I think we think that we have to be perfect, and we forget that anything you try, there's a learning curve. There's always a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody comes out of the womb and walks.
Right. Except for maybe a giraffe.
Right. Well, no human.
No human
does that.
No human. And it's really heartbreaking, because that's what keeps people from starting, So I just wonder how many people are out there in the world, not just in my scene, with handmade products and all of that, but people who want to start consulting businesses or, whatever it is. How many people are just, like I said before, getting in their own way and not starting because they fear that they have to be absolutely perfect. And if they make one wrong move, they're doomed, for like their dream has to be gone. So I just wonder, I think there's a lot of people out there like that. They just won't start.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think perfectionism really keeps us from starting things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you work with startup crafters at this point, right? Consulting.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, my audience is people who are makers of some sort, and that really gravitated again from the ribbon print company. It kind of morphed into this more defined market.
Mm-hmm.
So it's people who are starting off making their product in some way. So they might be an inventor, so they made the prototype and now they have a factory maybe producing, or they're a potter and they are always going to be the one who is always making their own product. But the commonality is handmade. And the reason for that is when you're doing things handmade, you inherently have some challenges that other businesses don't have. So we go and then we focus on those. So
can you tell me some of those challenges?
Well, one of the challenges, particularly for the group that is they don't want to necessarily get bigger, because remember, also in business, just to have a business doesn't mean bigger and bigger and bigger is always better for you. Sometimes when you grow bigger, you grow out of the love that you have of your business. Mm-hmm. And as I was bringing up pottery, I'm thinking of one gentleman in particular. Here, I just told you that I always am working with women, and I'm bringing up an example of a man. But he had actually been a criminal lawyer and decided it really was getting to his health. And at one point he just decided, I'm not doing this anymore. And he started doing his pottery, and he's built his business up to really the level that he wants. He doesn't want other people working for him. He has a nice studio. He goes out to craft shows. He's making enough money to support himself and his partner. I think his partner might be involved in the business as well. I'm not sure. I kind of forgotten that, but that's as big as they want to get. But inherently with maker businesses, if you're in that realm where you don't want to add staff, etc., you're limited to how much you could ever make, because let's face it, there's only a certain amount of time if you're the maker, but also the more you sell, the more work you've just made for yourself. Right. So there's that kind of, it's kind of a wheel, right? The more you sell, the more work. Then how do you sell more if you have to make? And so there's those type of challenges. So that's one example of a challenge. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. It's not as scalable unless you start outsourcing it, and then you lose a whole lot. Mm-hmm. I actually found that with my business, outsourcing to China was the biggest mistake.
Well, I actually do work with China quite a bit. I work directly with a factory there for the ribbon print company, because this is my own brand of ribbon behind here. And so I also know those challenges all too well. But again, I go back to, sometimes when you grow, scaling, that's the big word these days, right? Growing bigger. And how much have you increased your company over a prior year? All of that. Depending on what your goals are, you may grow yourself right out of what you love to do. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you're sitting on a business that might be making more money, but you hate getting up every morning. Right. That's not good either. So there's a balance. Like, what are you really trying to start off with? I have a program called Maker's MBA, and we talk about how to go from starting, like you haven't done a thing yet. And the very first thing we talk about is, what's your vision and what are you trying to do? And are you going to really like it when you get there? I virtually say, okay, now you've defined what you want. Maybe I'll give an example. You may think, and I'm going to stick with the idea of perfectionism. Okay, so someone might think, oh my gosh, if I could have a shop on Main Street in my community, I would be so happy. People would be walking in the door all the time. I get to see neighbors. I love people anyway. I'll be able to talk. I'll be able to sell my candles. Anyone who knows me knows I love candles, so I like to use that as an example all the time. I can have candles going. I'll have some tea and coffee going. It's going to be beautiful. I love it. That's what my dream is. So that would be the first thing that they would say, right? And then I say, okay, so that's your dream. That's awesome. Now live in that dream for about 3 days. Okay, so when you're going to have to get up, get the kids off to school, do whatever you need to do. Then you've got to be at the shop by probably 9 o'clock latest if you open your doors at 9:30 or 10. And now someone has to be at that shop until 6 o'clock at night. And the coffee doesn't just make itself. You've got to continually having fresh coffee, and the floors need sweeping, and product needs cleaning and adjusting. And then there are customers who are going to be coming in, which is awesome, but are you good around people for 8 hours a day, every single day, 6 days a week, or whatever it is? So like really live in what you think you love to do. And, that yoga class at 11 o'clock that you're doing, you won't be able to do that unless you have an employee in your shop. So it's like all these extra things that you don't think about when you first think of your dream. And I'm not saying they're bad, because a lot of people love what they're doing, but you have to think of that first, because you don't want to spend all your time creating and making something and finally be there and say, I don't even like this now. Like after all this time and money and heartbreak and stress and nerves and anxiety and excitement, I'm now here and I'm not happy. So we look at that way in the beginning. So
I think it's a great idea to sort of plan that out. But I think also that we can get stuck in the perfect vision of what it's going to be, and then the reality, it becomes this completely different thing than what we think.
Exactly. You said it way better in like a half a sentence, and I just took like a million words to say it. But I'm not perfect, so it's all okay.
So to bring up a word that I guess can be kind of controversial in the crafting business these days, do you work with a lot of people who get their start with Etsy?
A lot of people go on to Etsy to start. A lot of people have been on Etsy, and I mean, Etsy's changed, of course, right, over time. I mean, Etsy in the beginning was the best platform to be on. It was really pretty much the only platform for handmade products. That's where people would go. Search was really good there. But as with everything, things change, right? Competitors come in. You've got Amazon Handmade now. You've got like all different platforms, because when someone sees a good thing, they're going to try and copy it, right? But I have a lot of people, I always say, no matter what platform you're on, whether it's Etsy, Amazon Handmade, like whatever platforms, selling directly from Facebook maybe, those are all good places for starters. If you want to just get an online presence up and going, but you still always, no matter what, also want your own website. Something that you control, something that won't get shut down randomly without you knowing, something where you can collect email addresses. Because if you are not able to know who your customers are, however are you going to get more business from them? And the best way to grow a company is this. I'm just going to go with this because I think it's really important for people to understand. I'm kind of on a kick with this right now. Is let's say you get 5 new customers a month. Okay. 5 new customers a month, and if they all fall away because you're never able to talk to them about getting repeat business, then you get another 5 customers a month, then you get another 5 customers a month, but none of them are repeating business, your business isn't growing. But if you get 5 customers a month and you lose, let's even say you lose 3, that meant you retain 2. So the next month, if you have a monthly product, let's say, Then you get 5 customers, but you have 2 from the prior month. Now you have 7 customers, and it keeps going and it keeps going. And that's how you grow a business. And the way to get retention from customers is to be able to continue to communicate with them, right? People who have farmers markets in the summer for the whole season, most likely they're going to see their regulars because they're coming every single week. But what happens after that season? They still might want your product, but they can't see you face to face. So maybe you need to email them, or people who only sell online, emailing. So no matter what, collecting emails is the most important thing of all in terms of being able to grow your business.
The business association in our local town does this wonderful thing they call First Friday. So every first Friday of the month, they put out a craft fair, essentially. Really, really cheap booths. And I love going to it. I have a policy of I won't buy store-bought jewelry anymore. I'll only buy jewelry that are from crafters because I want to support that.
I love that.
Right? And I talk to them, and nobody's asking me for my email. Nobody's collecting any kind of contact information.
Oh my gosh.
Nobody has websites even. So I become that pushy business person that's like, why don't you have the website? Why don't you? And they're
good.
Like I have 3 heads.
Good. They need to be listening to my podcast and coming and doing Maker's MBA with me. Because I mean, yeah, there's so many people who are like that, and they could be making life so much easier for themselves by just putting some of these things in place.
Oh, and even when I suggest it to them, I think they're like, well, we're happy doing our thing on the Sundays. And
okay, and I'll go down that route too. Maybe that's all they want.
Right.
You know, I mean, if that's, you know, it's just kind of a sideline, you know, thing. Yeah. I you know, that's fine. That's fine. You know, it depends on what they want.
True. It just seems to me, I've done craft shows, and it seems like so much work to sit there and not make any money.
Right.
It's so much work.
And then you get into the whole, are they even pricing their products well?
No.
You know, but the thing is, but here's the thing too, back to the theme of perfectionism, right? When we run our own businesses, we can do whatever we want. You know, we live or die with our decisions, right? But if they don't want to collect email addresses and don't want to have a website and just want to sell, you know, a little bit of whatever their product is over the weekend and maybe just make a little bit of money so they can go out to dinner that night or something. And if that's their choice, have at it. Mm-hmm. You know, that's great if that's what makes them happy.
Are they charging enough? This beautiful pair of earrings, which I'm so sad I lost them, that I bought at the last one.
Well, see, if you had their email, you could get another pair.
I could get another pair if I had their email.
Or their website.
They did have a maker's mark on the jewelry, but it was too small to read. So I couldn't even maybe look up a maker's mark. And I would have paid twice. I would have happily paid twice what she charged for these earrings. Like, you know, and she said, but we're just going to have dinner. I'm like, but I could have bought you drinks too.
Yeah, exactly.
I could have had a cocktail.
Exactly.
Right? So, yeah, is pricing something you do with your clients, so like helping them figure out that piece? Because I know for a lot of people starting out, that becomes a really big roadblock.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, we talk about pricing. And there's really, just to kind of summarize it, there are 4 elements to your price. You know, when you first are making something, let's say you knit scarves, okay? And a friend of yours says, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Will you make me one? I'll pay you, you know? And you're doing it, so you're not really doing it for business, you're doing it for fun. So either you're going to say, oh, you don't have to pay me, I'll make it. I just love doing this, so I'll make one for you. Or just pay me for the materials. You know, forget the fact that it took 2 hours, 3 hours to make, maybe longer, you know, who knows, doesn't matter. But that's all hobby, that's all fun, fine. When you decide that you are formally making a transition from a hobby to a business, that's when you need to start thinking about pricing. But it's so easy just to let the old ways of what you did when you were in a hobby mode transfer over to pricing for when you're in a business mode. So the 4 elements, kind of overall, there's more detail under this, of course, but just I think for purposes now, the 4 elements of a price need to be, the first and most obvious are your raw materials, but it's all the raw materials. So it's not just your paper or thread or things like that. It's glue like it's everything that you need for a product to come together. That wasn't a very good description, but I think you guys get it.
Right, yeah.
The second one is, how did you get what you needed? Like if you had to order online, then there was also a shipping charge for you to get it. Or if you had to go out to a local store and it's half an hour away, you had some gas charges, like things like that. Like how did you obtain the products that you needed to make your product? So that should be included in your price. Then there's production costs. How long did it take you to actually make it? So production costs in the very most simplistic mode is time, which is the biggest one, right? And then after that, then you add on margin, right? And the margin is over and above then the cost that you're actually making on the product. But between these last two, between production costs and margin, this is how you do two things. You pay yourself a salary, even if it's just a little bit, right? And I always suggest you pay yourself, even if it's just $1 a week, something to just start getting into the mode of doing that. Then that's also how you have money to grow the business. How you have money to be able to pay to get your domain name and to get your website up. Or how you have money, like whatever other, to pay for that person who's going to do your taxes eventually, because you don't want to do them, right? But that money has to come from somewhere, and it still is going to have to come from the money that you make off of the sale of your product. Again, if you're a maker business. So
yeah, and I know when I was first figuring out my pricing, when I was doing my craft business, I knew I would want to sell wholesale as well, like from the get-go. So my pricing structure was all, how do I make money at a wholesale price
first?
Yeah. Because wholesale is half of retail.
Right. So, right. Yeah, and that all gets back to what's your vision in the very beginning. Right. What are you thinking you're going to want to do in the very beginning? So.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about pricing and self-esteem, though, because I think especially for a painter, let's say a painter, there is a how much I love this painting value added, and how attached I am to my work value gets added, and our sense of self-esteem gets added or not to the price of that work. Do you want to touch on that for me?
It's hard for people who are creators to recognize that half the population finds it so difficult to even conceive of someone being able to do what you do. Like when you're a maker and it comes so naturally to you, it's just like, well, yeah, I mean, this is so easy. I'm just throwing this together, whether it's a painter, to use that example, or whatever. But you have a natural talent. And a lot of people don't have that. So when they look at your products and your paintings, for example, they resonate with the style. They have to obviously like your style, whatever. But it's something that's not as achievable for them, and that people will really recognize you for, that you don't give yourself as much credit for, right? And you have to remember, again, as an artist, if you're looking at doing this for a business, you have to command certain prices to ever be able to stay in business. And we all want you. I don't know how to make candles. I got to go back to things I love. Okay. I don't know how to make candles. I'm never going to make candles. I have enough things going on in my life, but I love candles. When I find candles I like, I will pay a lot for them because I love them so much. Right? And so those are the types of people that you need to find for whatever price point you're going to be at with your products. You may be a low cost provider and just, your things are really reasonable, which means you're going to have to sell a whole bunch of them to make money. You might be middle, or you might be high end, and all of those command different ways of going to market. But I think the whole point in terms of it being made from us, makers have to put themselves out there. Artists, you put your whole heart into what you're drawing and what you're making. And so I think sometimes our desire of just that acclamation that people like what we're doing by way of purchase overrides the money that we're getting for the art. if that makes sense. We just want someone to buy from us so much because that validates us that we don't really charge even what we're worth. Because what if someone, you know, people just say, oh, that's beautiful, and never pay what it's worth, then we think our art's crap, no one loves it, right? When really we might not be with the right audience, in front of the right audience.
Right.
So.
I think, I know with me, with my business, it took a long time for me to wrap my head around the fact that I was not my customer.
Oh.
My customer had a whole lot more money than I did to blow on stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
So
what'd you do with your pricing?
My pricing, well, for some of my prices, I had one item, and I don't make it anymore, but I used to, and it was a crocheted, this is going back years and years now, but it was a crocheted doll. Took me about 8 hours to make. And I didn't sell a lot of them. It was already like $100. I already had priced it over $100, which when you calculate it out, I was maybe making about $2 an hour by the time I was done with everything, right? Right? This is way, way back. And it was so much work that the price just gradually shifted up and up and up. And then finally I priced it at, I hate making this. If somebody wants to pay me, $900, I'll suck it up and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where it ended up being priced. And somebody out in California bought it as a gag gift for a baby shower because it was a childbirth education doll.
At $900?
I am not my customer.
Whoa.
Right?
That's a great story. Yeah.
Not only that, but she wanted it next day. And I said, well, for me to stay up all night and make this thing for you, we're going to have to overnight ship it. And I'm going to have to add an extra, couple $100 just for the, the pain in the butt fee. It was the pain in the butt fee. And
well, you had to put your life aside to do that.
Yeah. And she emailed me back. She's like, yeah, no problem. Where do I send the money? I'm like, okay, then.
Wow.
I am not my customer.
But good for you for doing that and adding that rush charge on, because you could have said, well, $900, that's a lot of money, right? So I'm going to do it to get the sale. But again, you had to put your whole life on hold. I don't know how long it had taken to make one of those dolls, but whatever it was, and get it in the mail for overnight, any of that, like everything I'm imagining that you do in your life, you had to stop so that you could take on this job.
Yeah. I think that boils back down to self-esteem. Is that knowing that you're good enough and that your work is good enough and that your time is valuable so that you are then charging what you're worth.
There's something else too. No matter what kind of a maker you are, you've invested time in learning how to perfect your craft. So for an artist, maybe that's art classes or special brushes. I'm not an artist, so I don't know all of that part.
Or a very, very expensive education at RISD,
Right. Well, but that's my point, is like the education, the skill, all the hours that you've put in practicing so that you can produce what you now are able to make. You probably have super expensive quality of the line professional brushes that sometimes need to be replaced or at least maintained. Other people have certain types of equipment, whether it's kilns or sewing machines or, all those things. So it's all those other things that we so often forget that these are skills that we've had to acquire and learn over time and have the talent to do, because not everybody can. We talked about that earlier. Right. But then also the cost of all of that, putting that together to make a finished product. So it's exhausting when you think of all the work that goes through with it, and all the time and years of development and learning and training and, all of that.
As a business owner in that field, now you also have the whole side of running your business, which you don't actually get to bill for. Because unless you're making your product, you're not making money. That like the paperwork and all of those logistics of running a business.
Right.
Are things that you're not actually getting billable time for. So
right.
So I'd like to ask
pros and cons of all different industries, right? Right. Because services, you could say, well, I don't have to put in any of the time until I actually am providing the service, but then that's time for money. And, products are a little different because you might be able to mass produce products or produce during a low season so you can take advantage of a high season. So there's different nuances for every type of business.
So I'd like you to talk a little bit about what it's like to run two businesses, because you essentially you have your ribbon business and then you have your blog. I mean, you do so much, so much. So
Yes, completely insane is really the bottom line. It is. It is. I don't suggest it to anybody, but I love it. So you have to be insane like me, and then you can do it. No, it's very confusing. And I have very different reasons to have both of the businesses. Like I was saying in the beginning, you have to have visions for your businesses almost before you start them. I listen to myself and I follow that for myself. So the ribbon print company, absolutely love the business. Whenever I say this, all my customers start freaking out. So I have to put a caveat on that this is not happening anytime soon, but this is a company that I'm building to sell someday. So I work it differently than my Gift Biz Unwrapped business, which is a lot of free content going out. I love helping other makers get started. And I don't see this as a saleable business because it's all me. Yes, I have classes and things that I sell, but it's more me while I'm in business, if that makes sense. So it's two different business intents. For that reason, my books look different for each of them. And my audiences are also different for each of them. So that's where it starts to add different levels of complexity on. And you and I talked about this, Sharon, before, as we were just starting to talk about this summit. And one of the things that I mentioned to you is one of my big challenges with my audience is, both of the audiences, I have to respect why they're communicating with me. So like for the ribbon print folks, they're communicating with us because they're buying our product. They need to know how to work the ribbon machine. They need support, et cetera, et cetera. And they're also in business and growing their business. So they might be interested in things on the gift biz side, like hearing my podcast and things like that. So we'll share with them and invite them over to this other side if they're interested. Okay. And some do, some don't. Okay. But on the gift biz side, no one's ever asked about a ribbon printer they don't even know probably it exists unless they're seeing that, and they kind of find out about it because of my story. But because of that, it gets very confusing when you start talking about email lists, because they have to be two separate email lists. And my ribbon print folks can be exposed to gift biz stuff, but my gift biz people should never be getting ribbon print emails. So it flows one way, but it doesn't flow another. And it goes back to, why are they connected with me in the first place? And what's the value that I'm providing to them, or negatively impacting them if I give them something that they never asked for. Right. So that follows through with newsletters. Hate the word newsletter, but so that we all understand what that means. Promotions, social media, messages on different platforms, all of it. So it gets really confusing. And the way I handle it is I have teams that are designated to different things. So like Lori, who's my right hand, world sanity saver, motivator, like all of it, knows everything, right? So she and I we have our hands in both things. But people who fill orders or do social media for ribbon print are only on the ribbon print side. I have a VA who helps me edit my podcasts. She also does some social media posts for me, etc. She's only on the gift biz side. So I don't, and same thing with other support levels, like in each of the two organizations. They usually only are working one or the other. So that way the communication can stay clear.
It's smart. It's smart. So
it's the only way I can figure out how to do it. Now, perfection, it's not. It's my best attack at it right now. I might find a better way to do it later, but that's what's working for me now.
Right. So. Well, it seems like it makes a lot of sense to separate out your teams that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if I'm confused, I can only imagine how they will feel. But right. That way, if they know specifically what they're supposed to be doing, it seems to be working well.
It also speaks to really understanding who your customers are and knowing who they are, so that you know how to talk to them.
Mm-hmm. And what they want. Knowing who they are, why they're interacting with me and what value they're looking for from me, and not trying to force something else on them that they never asked for. It's a great way to get unsubscribes. So,
right. Yeah. And you don't want that.
No, you want those email lists.
But that's kind of a perfect segue into what it is you do have for this audience. I understand you have a free offer for them.
I do. Well, first, I would love for you to go over and listen to my podcast. It's called Gift Biz Unwrapped. iTunes, Stitcher, sound like everywhere you can listen to podcasts, even Alexa. All you have to do is say, Alexa, let me listen to the Gift Biz Unwrapped podcast. So that's always fun.
That's cool.
But then I also thought a good giveaway would be the biggest question that I get asked from my audience, which is always, how do I make more sales? How do I get more customers? How do I make more sales? So I have a freebie for all of you that talks about 10 ways to getting more sales. So that's available for you.
Well, that sounds like a really valuable freebie, because if all 10 of those work, you get 10 sales out of it. I think that's definitely your money's worth.
Yeah, I mean, each one of them is multiple sales, and not everyone's going to like every single way of getting sales. So these are all just big buckets of different ways that you can be bringing in sales. And I would suggest to everybody, you gravitate to what feels best for you. You know, like, we all don't have to be doing all the things, you know. I mean, just because you might see someone who's podcasting and saying, oh my gosh, I'm attracting such a great audience here, you know, whatever, doesn't mean you should be, you know, jump into podcasting. You know, it just depends on what's right for you and matches your personality, what feels comfortable and good for you, where your audience resides, etc. So when you get this download, what I suggest you do is look through them. Some of them you might already be implementing, so that's awesome. But others, you know, pick one or two that you feel will be right, and then really work those and get more business. More than 10, I'm hoping. More than 10.
And repeat ones.
And repeat ones, for sure. For sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
It's been my pleasure, Sharon. It's been really fun.